morning again, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to start our event now. But before we do, shall we stand up and sing our national anthem, Negaraku? Thank you. Please be seated. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Johnson Chong. Thank you. So, Mr. Lim Kit Siang has been around for so long, he's become a fixture, and sometimes I think we take him for granted. I just want to make a few remarks before I invite them up. But now, thanks to Thuan Chye, we now have a book that reveals a different side of Lim Kit Siang. I used to be in politics myself, and I've taken my fair share of shots at this larger-than-life man, I must admit. But after reading the book and moderating the webinar and having dinner with Mr. Lim, I actually feel like calling him Uncle Kit. If you have not read the book, I would suggest you hold your opinions about the man. You may support him or not support him, but I think if we all want a better version of Malaysia that we have today, we should read it. Yeah. So, okay, that's my sales talk. If you want to get a copy, there are copies out there, and you can get it personally signed by Mr. Lim and Mr. Key later. So don't worry about that part. Today's event is going to be very simple. We're just going to have a few remarks from this distinguished people, of course, the author, the subject of the book himself, and our special guest. So why don't we not waste time? Why don't you join me to invite our guests up onto stage, or rather our speakers, Mr. Thuan Chye, Mr. Lim Kit Siang, and Syed Sadiq Abdul Rahman. Syed Abdul Rahman. Come, sir. I think you are the one in second one. Yeah, you're sitting here. There you go. I think for many of you, you probably already know who Thuan Chye is, and I don't need to go into details of his very colorful career. But in case there are some who are new to Mr. Thuan Chye's writing, he, apart from being a writer, is also an actor, a poet, was a journalist some time back, and a playwright. I think his dedication to the truth made him leave journalism. I don't know whether that's true. That could be apocryphal. But anyway, between 2008 and 2018, he has written 10 books, and I think mostly about Malaysian politics, to help raise Malaysians' awareness about our political situation. And I am quite pleased when I did a bit of, as usual, using Google to research. I found out that he is the inaugural recipient of the Annex Heroes Award in 2008. To me, that is significant because it is an award given by the people. So, without further ado, let me invite Mr. Thuan Chye to tell us a bit more about the book.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this book launch. If you're thinking that it's going to be like most other launches, a boring event filled with speeches, thanking people, and so on, well, you might be right. I'd like to begin by thanking my old friend and former schoolmate, Andrew Lim, the boss of Sogo, for offering to host us today and getting his staff members to facilitate the event, especially Sogo Executive Director Lisa Yung and her team. Andrew has been very supportive of the work I've been doing in recent years, and I'm ever grateful to him for it. I'm also grateful to Hannah Yeoh, the MP for Segambut, and her team for helping to coordinate the event's logistics. And most certainly to Johnson Chong of Malaysiana LCMS, not only for emceeing this event, but also for giving me much needed moral support. My thanks also go to Syed Saddiq, the Orang Muda of the hour, for agreeing to come. Without his presence, the book launch would be looking like a showcase of old fogies. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Lim Kit Siang. I'm not referring to you as an old fogey. You are an exception. You are ageless. In fact, you are so ageless that when you were only a Form 2 student, you were already behaving like an old fogey. You know, you were discussing with your school friends issues like the Suez Canal crisis, the Afro-Asian Conference, the Hungarian Revolution. For goodness sake, you were then only 13 years old. Which 13-year-old cares about things like that? You were old before your time. When I was 13, youngsters were concerned about other things. For instance, when we were studying the abridged version of a novel called Hatter's Castle in class, a chapter ended with a man and a woman walking along a canal under the moon and the stars and holding each other's hands. But when the next chapter came on, we were told that the woman had become pregnant. I was shocked. I exclaimed to the classmate seated next to me, "How can she get pregnant? They didn't do anything, what? They were only holding hands." My classmate replied, "What do you mean? Do what? My father told me people only have to hold hands and they can get pregnant." I nearly fainted. So there you are. Lim Kit Siang is of another breed. He was ahead of his time. He was already concerned about politics while mere mortals like me were asking questions about holding hands and getting pregnant. And it is thanks to him for having given so much of his life to politics that someone like me could come along and poke around and tell the story about the ups and downs of his dramatic life. He will probably not agree that his life has been a dramatic one. In fact, one of the things he said to me in my first interview with him was that his life was actually quite ordinary. Ordinary? Really? Of course, I didn't believe him. So, I went on to write a story that has turned out to be quite the opposite of ordinary. In fact, Volume 1 even ends with a dramatic cliffhanger. And I swear, I didn't have to make anything up. So, Mr. Lim, let me say a big thank you for your presence here today and for giving me the chance to tell the story of your life. As for you, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy indeed to see all of you gathered here to celebrate an event that has been a long time coming. I felt for years that I should write a biography of Lim Kit Siang so that people would know about his love for his country, a love that has demanded so much of him in terms of hard work and sacrifice. I also hoped to understand from his story why he is such a misunderstood man. Why is a man who has a positive agenda of wanting to build a better Malaysia so maligned and demonized? Why is he called anti-Malay when he wants nothing more than a country where Malaysians of all races can live, work, and prosper together? Why is he called anti-Malay when the political party he leads fields Malay candidates at elections, whereas the MCA and the MIC field none? Why is he called a Chinese chauvinist when, as the well-respected journalist P. Gunasekram mentioned recently, there have been far more Indian MPs from the DAP than from the MIC? Why is he called anti-royalty when he led his party to vote against Mahathir Mohamad's bill to curtail the powers of the Malay rulers in 1983? UMNO itself kept quiet when Mahathir launched his scathing attacks on the sultans in order to get the bill passed. Kit Siang, on the other hand, made an impassioned speech in Parliament opposing the bill. But, as expected, his speech was blacked out by the media. Are Kit Siang's actions the actions of someone who is anti-Malay and anti-royalty? And so, I set out to find out about Lim Kit Siang, the politician, and also about Lim Kit Siang, the man. I had to do a lot of research to get the facts and also interview 60 over people who were witnesses to history. What they gave me was precious and invaluable. A few of them are here today. I'd like to once again express my gratitude to them for the help that they gave me. Some of them have become friends, and that's the part I cherish the most. I also interviewed all the members of Kit Siang's family and some of his relatives. From that, I discovered that the sense of family has always been important to him, and that it has been passed on to his children. And of course, the person who has been his strongest pillar of support is his wife. As his son Guan Eng recently said, Kit Siang couldn't have done half of the things he's done without the support of Neo Yok Ti. As for Kit Siang himself, I interviewed him 10 times, and on the whole, it was a pleasurable experience. We shared quite a lot of laughs together. But sometimes it could be like what his DAP comrade Tony Pua recently described it as, wringing water out of a stone. This was particularly so whenever I asked Kit Siang about his private self. As he's a very private person and a self-confessed introvert, he would usually give short answers. Sometimes he would try to deflect it with his characteristic brand of humor, which is usually dry. You know, huh? And always delightful. Once, after an interview, we went for dinner and were joined by a friend of mine. My friend knew about the interview and asked Kit Siang how he felt about it. Kit Siang replied, "I felt victimized." I wish to emphasize here that the biography project is an independent one. Kit Siang got to know the contents of Volume 1 only when I handed him the first published copy. Before that, I never told him anything. And to his great credit, he never asked. Throughout the time I was putting the book together, not once did he ask. I greatly appreciate that. It tells me what kind of a guy he is. Money is, of course, needed to fund the project. For Volume 1, many of the people who helped sponsor it were my friends and old schoolmates. I feel blessed to have friends such as these. They are true friends, and they are really hard to find. I also got much appreciated money from a handful of business people and professionals, and also from a relative who happens to be a former state assemblyman from Gerakan. For Volume 2, I have to go out and beg for money again. So if any of you would like to sponsor it, whether out of the kindness of your heart or because you feel that the story of Lim Kit Siang deserves to be told, please come and talk to me at the end of this event. I'm serious about that. It seems that Syed Saddiq is a terror when it comes to raising money. He is reputed to have raised 1 million ringgit in one day. Incredible. I should get to know him better. I hope people will read the book. They will find things in it that they never knew before or have forgotten. For instance, people may not be aware that Undi 18, the lowering of the voting age from 21 to 18, was not tabled in Parliament for the first time in 2019. It was actually first tabled as a private member's bill as far back as 1978, 4 decades earlier, by none other than Lim Kit Siang. He was far ahead of his time. In the 1970s, he also moved private members' bills for the setting up of a human rights commission, the independence of the anti-corruption agency, and a law to prevent frog jumping. Party hopping. In doing all that, he was also ahead of his time. As for his personal side, the book shows you a Kit Siang who is not just a political firebrand, but also a human being with a lot of heart. This is evident, for example, in his relationship with Sarawak DAP leader Wong Ho Ling. The latter was warded in hospital for cancer. Ho Ling wrote in his personal diary, I quote, "Just yesterday, Ngai Ku Ham was telling Irene," that's Ho Ling's wife, "and me, that when Kit Siang broke the news of my ill health to him in confidence, he saw Kit Siang sob for the first time. I was so moved by it that when I wrote about that episode for the book, it actually brought tears to my eyes. And reading it back afterwards, I still choked with emotion. Apart from telling Kit Siang's story, the book is also a story of its times. It makes clear to Malaysians, especially those of the younger generation, that the mess we are in today, the filth we see around us now, had its origins way back in the past. Just to give an example, political thuggery is not a recent phenomenon. As far back as 1971, no less a personage than the Selangor Menteri Besar, at the time it was Harun Idris, threatened to surround Parliament with 10,000 UMNO youth members if certain amendments to the Constitution were not passed. It's there in the book. You'll also come to realize that the rot in this country solidified in the 1980s. That was when Malaysia reached the point of no return. The country was then under the watch of Prime Minister, you know who lah? Mahathir Mohamad. At the time, the biggest scandal involving people in high places was the BMF scandal. It was arguably the scandal that set the trend for subsequent corruption schemes involving the government, right up to 1MDB and beyond. The book covers the BMF scandal extensively. The book also shows how under Mahathir, Ketuanan Melayu was celebrated and racial polarization became worse. How under Mahathir, Islamization flourished because he wanted to make UMNO appear holier than PAS. The result from that was religious polarization. Racial and religious polarization are now the biggest problems in Malaysian society, the twin terrors of our existence. Kit Siang and the DAP fought against the corruption and the filth, the racial and religious polarization. The book tells how they did it, but the question still arises. Were they fighting a lost cause? Was Kit Siang merely a dog barking at the mountain, seperti anjing menyalak bukit? This is what makes his story worth telling, because there's so much human interest in it, because there's heartbreak and there is jubilation in it, because it has meaning for other Malaysians, and because it tells us how our country has become what it is today. It's a story that needed to be told. It's a story that you will want to read. Thank you.
Thank you, Thuan Chye. I hope he didn't do too good of a job introducing the book and then you bypass reading it. Huh? I know a lot of people are lazy to read, but I assure you it's worthwhile reading it. I finished it. I am a very slow reader, but I finished it in a few days. Mr. Key, I take issue with you saying we've come to point of no return, because I'm sure this young man and this older man will disagree with you. So I'm going to give them a chance to do that. Anyway, okay, so again, Syed Sadiq Syed Abdul Rahman needs no introduction, right? But anyway, I thought I'll just mention a couple of things. Of course, he's the MP of Muar, president of MUDA, that was recently registered as a multiracial party. And if you still haven't joined the party, there are two here. Right? And I'm sure there are many representatives you can talk to. There are some MUDA young people there, I see, very proud in their black t-shirts, very cool black t-shirts. And of course, wanted to mention the point, from 1978 to 2018, there was a break of what, 40 years, and then Syed Saddiq took up the mantle to push Undi 18, and now we have Undi 18. Thank you. And of course, I think the last accomplishment of Syed Saddiq is not lost on us. He still is, the youngest cabinet minister ever to be appointed at the age of 25. Mr. Syed Saddiq.
Thank you very much, everyone. I just want to point out that Mr. Key took one of the most important points which I wanted to mention. That in contrast to popular belief, it wasn't Syed Saddiq, the Member of Parliament of Muar and then serving Youth and Sports Minister, who first seriously pushed the idea of Undi 18. It was Saudara Kit Siang. And it came at a time, I mean, in the 1970s, who would ever imagine Undi 18 being a popular thing? Most likely it was unheard. A lot of countries have not even done it yet. I'm pretty sure the discussion and discourse in Malaysia on Undi 18 and enfranchising millions of young voters were not even in the mainstream. And in politics, one thing which I've learned is that your heart must be in the right place. And for someone at that age, at a time in which Undi 18 may not even be heard, popular, may not be a lightning rod issue, Saudara Kit not only pursued it, proposed it, and I believe that if he were part of government then, I think the need for a Syed Saddiq would not have arisen. And that's the beauty of Saudara Kit Siang. I'll never forget the conversations I've had with him. I remember it was in Sabah, immediately after Muda attempted to register itself. Obviously, it took us 1.5 years to get registered. And it was during the state election of Sabah last year. During that time, we were campaigning, and when Saudara Kit saw me, first thing he said, Saddiq, Muda cannot just be an exclusively young party. And my response immediately was, sir, if you were to join Muda, I'll welcome you with an open hands because it's open to all, young and old. But the point which I wanted to make is that Saudara Kit also mentioned that being young is not just reflective of one's age. It is really the state of the mind. And the reason why that comment meant a lot, because despite Saudara Kit being 50 years old, I actually think that he is as young among us in our 30s. Until today, he still pursues things which are very close to the hearts and minds of young people. He still pursues incessantly for a multiracial, moderate Malaysia, for reforms which I believe young people genuinely want: decentralization, a better wage, a better pay, good quality of education, regardless of race and religion. And these are issues which transcend issues of race, religion, and age. And that's something which I believe very closely. So when I was asked to speak on a book launch in regards to Saudara Kit, I immediately took up the opportunity. But I do not want to blabber about his details. I'm very sure that the book says it better. And in many other books on Kit Siang, the details are there. But I'd like to share something a little bit more personal. Personal in the way of how I viewed Kit Siang when I first started out and where I'm at today. So we've heard the stories of Kit Siang being portrayed as a devil, as a guy who wanted to remove Mara, Felda, Felkra, all the towering institutions which wanted to help underprivileged Malays. Someone who wanted to challenge and destroy the monarchy, someone who wanted to burn Malaysia to the ground if need be by racial riots. And obviously, I was a consumer of that narrative. When I was young, and I told this to him personally before, and I'm telling it to you again today, is that I believed it. I believed the demonic image of Kit Siang because I consumed TV3 and Utusan on a daily basis. I came from a lower middle income family in Johor, mom being a civil servant, a teacher, and my father, a Singaporean who worked as a laborer. And that was a narrative which we were fed in almost every single day. So being young, I believed in it. I grew up in a staunchly Barisan Nasional family. When I say staunch, I mean to a point that during elections, parents and family members will check one another to ensure that my siblings who could vote then will vote for Barisan Nasional, go out brandishing their fully sponsored BN merchandise, cool hats, t-shirts, and what have you. And it was in that family that I was taught about Saudara Kit. I don't blame my family, and I'm very privileged to be in a very loving family, but it was institutions which were built that way, subverted, to paint Saudara Kit as the most evil demon in Malaysia. Things changed in 2015 and 2016. Then I was merely an officer in the Prime Minister's office and a researcher under the Johor state government. And the 1MDB scandal came up. And obviously then, Saudara Kit was one of the first few persons who spoke supremely vocal about it. And then I started to realize we shared a lot more in common, especially when we started meeting up with one another. And then it wasn't very personal conversations. Then it was with Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin to Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. And I don't come from this political family. I mean, I was the first one in my family who actually got involved in politics. And then a lot of things which Kit Siang said were things which I believed in as well. And then I realized that it's not that demon which everyone wanted to portray. He worked a lot harder than many of the younger politicians. I think until today, I think he writes more press statements than many of the younger politicians, and every day I'll keep on asking, what new press statement will Kit Siang write? And I think that level of diligence, hard work, really exemplifies someone who's of that age but still wanting to work as someone who's as young as myself. And as we campaign from state to state, that's when I realized that Kit Siang is not the Kit Siang which has been portrayed by the media for decades in Malaysia. That we share a lot more things in common, that while we may not be born into the same family, race, or religion, and may be divided based on what institutions have fed us for decades, but I think common values, virtues, ideas are what tie us all up together, which then led to the historic win of GE14. I share this story because I believe that's the beautiful story of the Malaysia which we are in today. That while we may be born into different families and shared a very divided past, but I think our future should be a lot more connected with one another. And the beautiful story of Malaysia is that our strength is indeed in our diversity, and that we should celebrate diversity, not merely tolerate it. And that while I may have very different views of Kit Siang in my past, but I had the opportunity to change and now keep on moving forward. And I believe that there are millions of other Malaysians who share the same belief as well. And if they don't share the same belief, it's not for us to pander, but for us to change hearts and minds of people. And I hope that if there's one particular trait in which people could pick up of Saudara Kit, is that unbelievable determination or pursuit to move Malaysia forward no matter how difficult and painful it is. The multiple sedition acts, ISAs, name OSAs, every single state machinery to tie him down, but he keeps on bouncing back and moving forward stronger. And his beliefs have not changed. And while I believe his party has been going through multiple different identity challenges, the Oxford Western group, the more hyper-Chinese group, but Saudara Kit has never changed no matter how unpopular it may get. And I think that's the beautiful part of politics which I've learned. That even in the worst case of scenario that Malaysia may not be ready to fully embrace moderation and multiracialism, that is not an argument for us to take steps back, but for us to keep on charging forward no matter how difficult it gets, no matter how many times we may lose, but it is about a journey to change hearts and minds of people and finding and building young characters who can do so. And the second thing which I think all of us can learn from Saudara Kit is that despite being someone of his age, stature, and experience, is to never stop giving opportunities to young leaders to climb up, whether it's his party in the AP or in different coalitions. I do not need to mention the number of young leaders in which DAP has cultivated, who now are not merely my political colleagues, but who I consider as some of my best friends. People like Saudara Chintong, Hanayo, Yobiyin, many of those who now I see as the best of friends and not just political colleagues. But they were given an opportunity at a time in which a lot of parties would choose to keep on nominating the same old faces. But Saudara Kit, I believe, played an instrumental role in changing that culture in DAP. And what I believe I would want to do better in Muda. And I think these are two very important values. So my final message to Saudara Kit is this. I think I have contributed to some extent to the demonization of yourself when I was young. In that system, through the multiple Biro Tata Negara camps which I've been forced to go at times, I would also volunteer to go. But that was my past. But my assurance is that in moving forward, in common values, common systems, I'd ensure that Malaysia will become that multiracial, moderate, prosperous, developed, dignified country which you had envisioned when you were young. And I believe that legacy and that thought will be continued by millions other young Malaysians regardless of race and religion. And if anyone thinks that saying this is something controversial because immediately you will be seen, you are a puppet of Kit Siang. I mean, they forget and they undermine the intellect of young and old, different race and religion, urban to rural Malaysians who share the same belief that they just want to see a Malaysia in which they could be proud to call home, regardless of the skin color in which they are born into, the religion in which they associate to, regardless of the class which they are in. But in the end, it's that ultimate unified journey which is to build a country which we are proud to call home, a country which will get its developed status, a dignified country free of corruption, with a good quality of education, a good pay, a good housing, a good public transportation, issues which tie us all up together. And that journey is ultimately the Malaysian journey, the Malaysian dream, which we should all embark on. So thank you very much, Saudara Kit. I look forward to working very closely with you, your colleagues, and those who you've inspired in Malaysian politics. And for those who hate you, demonize you up until today, they are not my enemies, but these are people who I will work tirelessly day in and day out to prove them wrong, but not by being arrogant, but to show that I was just like them. But I believe the best way to heal and unify Malaysia is not through vengeance and vendetta, but it's by changing hearts and minds of people to realize that we are indeed stronger together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saudara Sadiq. I think that's walking proof that we have not come to the point of no return, right? We can still change our minds, and I believe the young politicians out there need to stand on the shoulders of giants like Lim Kit Siang so that we can see far, far ahead. So, now we've come to the final speaker. I really don't need to introduce this man. I just, again, I picked out the most salient accomplishments, even at, he is 80 now. So in 2018, he would have been 76. He chose to go into yet another new constituency And knowing the gerrymandering that goes around, that means it's going to be a challenging constituency. He took up the challenge, Iskandar Putri. And he has been an MP in 5 different states. I'm not sure anyone is aware of that. I'm sure the DAP folks are. Penang, Perak, Selangor, Melaka, Johor. Where the fight is, he goes. And he has been opposition leader for almost 30 years. Longest opposition leader in Malaysia by anyone. Yeah. So, Saudara Lim Kit Siang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, the ladies and gentlemen, the organizing chairman, Thuan Chye, Syed Sadek, DAP chairman and the DAP leadership, Tun Musa Hayatam, and fellow Malaysians. I did not know that Sogo has a convention hall. When I came in just now, I thought, wow, so big. How to fill the hall? I'm very humbled by your support. And Tun Musa and Sadiq remind me of the old days when we were still young. I'm now a member of the Octogenarian Club. In the 60s, well before I think 68, when Tun Musa was standing for election for the first time in the Segamat Utara by-election. I got involved in politics, in change, when I was about 26, 27. I got elected to parliament when I was 28. Sadiq became a minister when he was 26. But I think it was very significant that in the middle of 2019, Sadiq was there. Chin Tong was there when I met the Prime Minister at that time, Tun Mahathir. And I reminded him of the importance of implementing the election manifesto. That is a commitment that we made for change in Malaysia. And the Prime Minister was agreeable to the setting up of a review committee. Chin Tong was the chairman, who became the chairman of the review committee on the manifesto. Of course, we thought we had 5 years. In the first half, in the first 30 months, it was slow because there was a lot of resistance and change need to be made. We can accelerate the implementation in the second half of the 5-year term. But we had 22 months. 22 months and we had a 2 backdoor governments. So that is important background. And I think that it's significant that the Sadiq was there because we felt that a promise is a promise, and if we cannot implement any manifesto commitment, there is something we have to be explained and frank to the people. There's a lot of disenchantment, there's a lot of hopelessness, even sense of betrayal that the great historic change that took place in the 14th general election on the May 9, 2018, did not end up with any fruition. But what do we do about it? Do we want to be resigned? Do we want to give up? Do we want to give way to despondency? Yesterday, an elected representative who was doing a master's program asked me what I thought of the new economic policy. And I thought of my first speech in Parliament in February 1971, 51 years ago. Tun Musa will remember that. And I said, the DAP, we believe in the affirmative program. But it must be based on need, not on race, because it is, there are the poverty and backwardness among all racial groups. And it should not be abused. It should not be abused whereby the rich and the privileged are able to make use of affirmative policies to acquire greater wealth. And in the 80s, I coined the word Amnoputra. Amnoputra, in order to describe the phenomenon. We are now half a century today. What do we do? What is the judgment? If we are able to make a judgment of the half a century of NEP, and we leave it to historians and sociologists to see whether there's any connection with the NEP or abuses of NEP to the kleptocracy that Malaysia became, to the possible infamy of infamies that we may face in the future. For half a century, Malaysia was in decline. One nation after another overtook us. Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, Vietnam, and the 2-year COVID pandemic, I think should be an eye-opener. That if we don't back up, if the nation does not back up, other nations will overtake us. Indonesia, Philippines. For the last 4 months, Indonesia has been having lesser daily COVID-19 cases and COVID deaths. In fact, they have, for the last 1 month, Indonesia has been having single-digit COVID fatalities. We are struggling between 2,500 cases and 4,500 cases. Why? What's wrong? Indonesia has 8 times our population. So I think these are things that we must think about. As I said, I've joined the club of the octogenarians. But what concerns us, what must concern us, must be the future. What is going to be Malaysia's future in 2030, or when Malaysia celebrates our 100th birthday, 2063. 2 months I won't be here. I won't be here. But we have a responsibility. We must think what we can do to make Malaysia a world-class great nation. There's no reason why Malaysia cannot become a world-class great nation. After all, we are at the confluence of 4 great civilizations: Malay Islamic, Chinese, Indian, Western. Where can we leverage on the values and the virtues of the best and be the best among the best? If not be the best, among the best. That must be our dream. That must be our aspiration. These are our thoughts. Yes, the last few days, there was a Malaysian politician who says that the Malays are divided, 3 parties, UMNO, Bersatu, and the PAS. This is the time for the Chinese to become the kingmakers. I don't believe in such a theory. We want Malaysians to be Malaysians first. First, so that a Malay, a Chinese, an Indian, Kadazan, or Iban cannot make Malaysia great. Only Malaysians can make Malaysia great. So we must extract the best from our past. We must find our way. We have lost our way. Malaysia has lost its way. We come to the stage where there are people who don't accept the Malaysian constitution. There are people who don't accept the Rukun Negara. And there are ministers and they have risen very high to become ministers. We must find back our place. We must mark up. It is not something that can be resolved in one day, 1 year, 2 years, 10, or even a decade or two. It will take a few decades. So we must find people who are brave enough, visionary enough to look into the future. Malaysia can be a world-class great nation. We can maintain our position in the international society, but not at the rate that we are going. So I think it's important, whatever, I don't know what the Thuan Chye is going to write in his volume 2. I don't know. I never knew what he wrote in his volume 1. I submit myself to his tender mercies. But whatever it is, I think it's important that we think of the future. Although we won't be around, but we have a commitment, we have a responsibility to make this country a better place for children and children's children, and that's all that is matters. So I thank you, all of you, for support, although it was unseen support, but I believe that the Malaysians want a better society. We must continue. We must not give up. We must not surrender. We must continue the unfinished business to make Malaysia a world-class great nation. Thank you very much.
Right. So if you have read the book, there is a reference to the final battle, Saudara Lim Kit Siang's final battle. And that battle is our collective battle, right? And I think we would be not doing justice to Saudara Lim Kit Siang and all his efforts, the sacrifice of his family, and so many more. So again, I'm pushing now not to sell the book, but perhaps if there are some generous people out there who would like to support Mr. Thuan Chye to come up with the second volume, because I also want to see what happens after the cliffhanger. Okay, so now we are going to the launch part. The photographers, media, please feel free to pop up here. Just give us a couple of moments whilst we do that, and then we will have the Q&A session after that, yeah? Please, can we have the easel to the middle? And Saudara Kit, Saudara Syed Saddiq, Chye, who shall sign first? Yeah, I think Lau Ta will sign first. Okay. Age before beauty. Okay. That's his style. Up to you.
Very handsome gentleman.
Yeah.
It's a good photo to
Yes, yes, it is. Come. You want to go? Thuan Chye, come. Maybe you want to date it as well? I'll just hold the easel just in case. Yeah. 4 ekor beli. All right, thank you very much. One more shot, one more photo. Gather here for a photo. Do you want to take off your mask, or is that risky? Yeah. All right. I think the photographers will appreciate that. Huh? What? Oh, later. other director ni. Okay, thank you very much. Please be seated, gentlemen. So now we are going to open for Q&A. I know with the political climate today, everybody is excited to know what's happening and all that. But since this is a book launch, shall we at least take a couple of questions about the book before we go into general questions, yeah? So, yes, sir, Mr. KJ John. Sorry, the mics will be around. They should be coming to you with a mic. Oh, there's one there, good.
Okay, my question is simply this. The cover of my book says Lim Kit Siang first. It doesn't say Malaysian first. The cover on the screen says Lim Kit Siang Malaysian first. Is this a typing error ghost or printer's ghost, or is it a good marketing gimmick? That's all my question is. Thank you very much.
Is that a serious question? Okay.
KJ, it was meant to test your eyesight. If you read carefully again, look at the book cover again, it actually says Lim Kit Siang Malaysian first. Right or not? No, then maybe you got a freak copy, which means you should keep it and auction it in 30 years' time. It might be worth a lot of money then.
Saudara Sivarasa has confirmed there's another copy with just Lim Kit Siang first. So these are valuable ones. Okay, I will give feedback to the printer. Okay. Yeah. If you all want one that says Malaysian first, by all means, we'll replace them. But then, of course, you have very unique copies. Don't worry about it. Yeah. This is something I will sort out with the publishers. Inside too, okay, wow. Oh, inside is correct. Thank you, Saudara Sivarasa. Yeah. Anyway, shall we, wow, this is literally about the book. But let's go back to the book. Yeah, 1 second.
KJ, I stand corrected. I'm so sorry. I apologize to you. I had no idea that there were copies like that. Yeah, but as Johnson says, you can have it replaced. Thank you.
All right, so those who would like to ask about the book, apart from the printing problem, yes, I see a lady there. Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Oops. How come the mics don't seem to work?
I have a question for Thuan Chye, actually. I'm Hanim. Hanim here, question for Thuan Chye. Thuan Chye, how do you view this book as something that contributes to nation building?
You know, it's very funny you asked this question. That was a question that my wife asked me this morning. And you are seated right behind her. She must have asked you to, poked you to ask a question, right? Of course, it contributes to nation building because it is the story of a man who has contributed a lot to the nation through his hard work, through his sacrifices, and through his dream for a Malaysia that, you know, would include everybody. And a dream of a Malaysia that is prosperous. As he says, what was it? World-class nation. So, and also because I think this book, as I said earlier, gives perspective, historical perspective. It's also about things that happened in the past that reflects on the present. And so those, many of us may have forgotten some of the things that happened in the past. So reading the book will give you an idea of how things happened in the past, and they had they resulted in what's happening now. So it's particularly useful, I think, for the younger generation who may not be aware, or who may have read history books that tell them something else. Yeah, we always need to have alternative histories. This book gives some kind of alternative history, but all based on fact. I didn't make anything up, I swear. Thank you, Hanim.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Question for Saudara Kate. There are quite a number of books already there, about people like yourself, biographies and so on. But what about you writing a book, telling us, what is good the future like in Malaysia for Malaysians? When would you be writing that book, Saudara Kate?
Well, I've been thinking about writing an autobiography, but that will be after volume 2. Otherwise, poor kid Thuan Chye won't be able to sell his book.
We look forward to that. We certainly look forward to that. Oh, there's a follow-up question. Yes, sir.
No. It's my question is, what are your views about future of Malaysia for Malaysians? A book on that, vision that you may have. I think that's very important for Malaysians. Yeah.
Many Malaysians seem to have given up hope and say there's no purpose and there can be no change. But I don't think that's true. Hope springs eternal in the human mind. But I think it's important to understand that what happened on May 9, 2018 is a historic achievement for Malaysians. I do not believe before May 9, 2018 that there could be a total change. I do not believe on the morning of May 9 that the UMNO could be toppled. But it was toppled. In fact, if you read some of the books that have come out recently, Najib was so sure that he will get 2/3 majority. But that was a fantastic achievement. But of course, we are going through a political process which we must go through that. We must find a political equilibrium for the best interest of the country, where the good values in society, the rule of law, good governance, the human rights, the welfare of the people must be given priority. But it takes some time. It is not correct to think that other countries have been doing well. The democracies, other countries have their weaknesses. In America, you have Trump. America is very divided. They have also their bad points, their disadvantages. So we must make the best use of Malaysia. Malaysia can be great, and if we are prepared to go through the agony of the present without giving up our vision, I think there's a chance of success. We must believe that it is possible and to make it achievable. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Yes. Ah, okay.
Yes. Yes, Saudara Syed Saddiq was just now saying that he also believed that Saudara Siang was a demon because he consumed all this utusan and TV3 in those days. And now it's even probably worse because you probably know that there's a study by MIT that lies and fake news travel 6 times faster online than the truth. How are we to combat this sort of thing? Is there a media strategy, a communication strategy by Pakatan, which sometimes seems to be slightly behind the curve? And also, you know, we are fighting not only the politicians, but it seems the deep state, which, as the recent Azam scandal has revealed, includes civil servants. So it seems like a heavy task, but I hope we can do it. But I'd like to know from any of you how we're going to do it. Thank you.
Why don't we let Saudara Syed Saddiq take that first?
I'll go first. Thank you very much. I'll answer the second question first. Maybe my answer may depart from standard practice of Pakatan Harapan or a lot of the more senior leaders in how they approach civil service. I'm proud to say that I come from a family of civil servants. My mom, my sister, my aunts, uncles, and a family of teachers who love their job and who love to educate Malaysians regardless of race and religion. And I was born into that family and I'm here because of them. When I was given the responsibility to lead the ministry, in less than 12 hours in office, immediately I had people in power contacting me to remove specific civil servants in the ministry. And obviously it was accompanied with photos of them wearing a BN shirt or allocating ministry resources for BN campaigns through sports and youth activities. Then I had a judgment call to make. Do I punish the civil servants by removing them, or do I try to focus on moving forward by working with them, but with very strict guidelines on how to move forward? If you ask different ministers, they would have answered differently. I decided to not punish them, but to work with them. And yes, I had to go through multiple rounds of justifications of some top level officers in the Prime Minister's office who said, remove, remove, remove. But what I can tell you, that decision not to remove in the end allowed me to work with the brilliant civil servants who I will defend and proudly defend. They were the ones who allowed me to work on Undi 18, and I can tell you, without the great civil servants, Undi 18 would never happen. Because the official response from, I kid you not, the official response initially was, oh, you need 1 or 2 years to do research. It's typical answer. But when you have the buy-in of civil service, that 2 years became 2 days, 1 or 2 days. On paid internship in government sector, it was the very same KSU and TKSU who some wanted to remove, who then worked with me, contacted the civil servants in the Ministry of Finance, then contacted the KSN, then we got it through. There are so many examples, and especially someone like me who was given a responsibility at 25 years old, and the civil servants in my ministry were the age of my father or my mother. And imagine if I had started my role by saying, oh, you wave a BN flag, oh, you did this, remove you. So I think moving forward, we need to be a lot more recalibrated in how we move. It's not easy. I mean, it's very idealistic. Oh, never mind, they did something wrong, remove, remove. But imagine you are a part of a civil service in serving a government which has never changed for the past 60 years. And yet you want to punish that civil servant for doing that. If that person had taken money into his or her pockets, no tolerance. that I'm fairly clear. But if that person had supported the party openly or discreetly, that is not for me to judge, and I will never judge. Even when I was serving in the ministry, the first thing I said, whoever you want to support is your right. Some of them even openly support Barisan Nasional, put it on your Facebook, Twitter page. And when there was a pekeliling to take action, I took down the pekeliling and said, that's wrong. What you want to say, it is your right. But just make sure when we are to do ministry work, we focus on it. I had no problems whatsoever. So I think moving forward, we need to understand civil service better. We cannot be arrogant. In the end, we are here to change systems, not people, and to punish people. The systems must change. I think that should be the way forward. On the part about communication of Pakatan Harapan opposition, I think Pakatan Harapan you have to ask Saudara Kit. But to me, even when we were part of government, those who said it's only a communication issue is kidding themselves. You can throw 10 billion ringgit in communications, but if you don't change the fundamentals, you don't focus on building a better vision and future for Malaysia and putting people who genuinely believe in that vision of Malaysia, then throwing 10 billion ringgit to it will not help. Because true experience is not just a matter of communication, it's really about making structural changes. It's very sensitive things for me to say, but that's why I think I've formed Muda Up, not to wage war Pakatan obviously, but I think I want to build Muda to be the most diverse, multiracial, gender-balanced, policy-driven party so that there is a competition to the top, not to the bottom, and in the end, ensuring that every party, DAP, PKR, Amanah, whichever party in government opposition will strive for that. And I think it becomes a healthy competition. When election comes, coalition discussion can take place. But it's about striving for a better Malaysia and making those structural changes which I think Malaysia rightfully deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Saudara Kit, Tuan Chye, would you like to add anything? No. Okay. Yes, Andrew.
My name is Azlan Adnan. I'd like to address this question to Saudara Kit, particularly about your core values. What are the roots of your political philosophy? What were the influences? Was it your family, your education, your religion, the books you read, the people you admired when you were young? I just want to have a grasp of why are you so idealistic and so persistent in it? So maybe it's addressed in the book. I haven't read the book yet, but I'd like to have some response on that. Thank you.
I'm unable to answer that question because I don't know how to answer it. But you believe that you have a contribution to make to society. It's not any person or deep religious values, but your sense that it is your responsibility to contribute to the well-being of the country. So I think I'm not unique. I think every one of us feel that we must do something. And that's why you have this crowd tonight, to others today. And if we can reignite hope among the people, reignite the vision among the people, I think there's a possibility of success. So I do not give ear to negative feelings. I believe that every one of us have ourselves to be better for everybody else. I don't have a simple answer for you.
Aslan, now you know what it is like to interview Kit Siang?
Okay, yes, Andrew.
Andrew Lim from KL Sogo. Two questions. First one directed to Saudara Lim Kit Siang. Do Do you agree that Tun Musa Hitam is the best prime minister we never had? Question one. Question two Yang Muhammad Said Siddiq. What is Muda's counter...
No, not about that.
Wait.
Maybe we can ask him to comment.
The second question is to Said Siddiq. What is Muda's counter-narrative to extreme religious fanaticism as expounded by Wahhabism?
Go ahead. Thank you. I just want to defend my Johor brother here, Tun Musa. He's a brilliant guy. I had the privilege of meeting up with him a few times and to listen to him nag to me for almost 4 hours straight. But the beautiful part of Malaysia, and I hope that we can see that more, is the kind of relationship between Tun Musa and Kit Siang. I'm pretty sure they were at each other necks when they were young. If you read many, many books from Kit Siang, it was fairly obvious. But in the end, their shared vision to build Malaysia as a developed and dignified country was similar. And that, you know, now they could be sitting with one another, eating food with one another, chilling with one another. I think that should be the kind of political atmosphere which young civil servants like myself should really focus on.
I know that there are some people who would like to hear from Tun Musa, but I think he rather not. Yeah. But so I'll make a comment here. Although you have put up a very good candidate, Andrew, I think Saudara Taufik's father would have been also a very good prime minister that we never had, i.e. Tun Dr. Ismail. Yeah. Anyway,
just to respond to the question which was directed at me, how to challenge creeping radicalism in Malaysia. I just want to share a very personal story. I'm not sure if Saudara Kit would remember, but it was reflected in his book, but which was obviously written by Chin Tong, which is another book we should really read about. When I first started my actual political journey, I remember then I was 22, turning 23, and Bersatu was founded. I was one of the 7 co-founders of Bersatu. I pushed quite hardly then for Bersatu to be a multiracial party. I think it's recorded, media, my statements. And I remember when we had a discussion, a very big discussion, among civil society members, existing opposition party leaders. In the end, the general agreement was that if we set up another multiracial party, we will not be able to take UMNO head-on in the rural heartlands. I have a very different view. It's coming from very optimistic, young, idealistic Syed Saddiq. I remember then people said, no, it must be a mono-ethnic party. And that was one of the times where I compromised. Fast forward, after Sheraton, I said, if I were to practice the same kind of politics, and to me this is the politics of pandering, instead of changing hearts and minds of voters, it's us trying to pander, hoping that we'll get their votes and then form and make that government a functioning government. We've tried that, it didn't work. I think we need to work harder to change hearts and minds instead of going through the shortcut. And that's why I decided to form Muda Up. So how do we challenge it? I am optimistic of fellow Malaysians. I completely agree with Saudara Kit. I think at the rate where we are at, Malaysia should already be a developed country with the best education system, a very moderate multiracial country. It should be the beacon of hope and the gateway of economic opportunities in Southeast Asia, and the exemplary option for majority Muslim citizens, countries across the world to look at Malaysia. You know, we can be a diverse and moderate country and successfully be governed well. But unfortunately, we are not. I think that the majority of Malaysians want the same thing. And I think I've traveled enough, especially when my family is of that background. I know that we want the same thing. Even when they were demonizing Kit Siang, they will still be talking about the same thing. They want better jobs, better wages, better public transportation, right? They don't want the level of discrimination which hurts them or their friends and their colleagues. They want a democratic system in which their voice are heard, not a system in which they could be sidelined easily. That while race and religion will always be something which they associate to, and we shouldn't demonize them for associating to race and religion. If they want to say that they're proud Muslim, they're proud Malay, sure. But as proud Muslim and Malay, we want the same things. We want a good country, a good education system, a good economic system. And I think in the end, we should take that battle head on. I think the reason why a lot of racial and religious demagogues are winning the battle is because there is a leadership and power vacuum which makes that argument that as a Malay, I can build up a better Malaysia for all Malaysians because I will take you head on your education policies on how you want to develop Malaysia, on your economic policies on how you want to redistribute the wealth, and on building strong economic institutions and foundation which will create better prosperity for all. But when you don't make that argument, you lose it out. And that's why I don't have to be apologetic. As a Malay Muslim, and I am a Malay Muslim, I'm a graduate of the International Islamic School, International Islamic University of Malaysia. I got through academic fellowship in religious studies. I will defend it. When there are debates about timah coming out, when there are debates about the Kedah state government banning gambling, and immediately people first think, wow, good, this is for Islam. But people forget when you do that, a state which is heavily indebted to federal government now will be even more disproportionately reliant on illegal logging, which will hurt the economic opportunities, the livelihoods of people in Kedah. Illegal gambling thriving, which hurts the economy and the people even more because illegal gambling targets those who are much younger. Economic opportunities gone, no taxation, but people don't make these arguments and people don't dare to challenge it. So my argument is, it's time for moderates to challenge that argument instead of shying away from that argument. And I feel at home being part of Muda because finally I can make that argument. I'm with people who believe in that. I think if I was in a different party, it would be very difficult for me to make this argument. So the hope for that moderate and multiracial Malaysia is there. We can win that argument. We just have to fight that argument with facts and figures. And moderates cannot be silent on these issues, speak up. Because once we speak up, I believe we are indeed already in the majority. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, time is running short. Yes, young man, one last question. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Okay. I have this question for Saudara Lim Kit Siang. It's actually not my question. It's from my father. I WhatsApp him just now. If he want to ask anything.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So here's his question. Sir, how should the young generation carry their mindset in order to pursue for a real harmony society? Like, how will YB advise the young Malaysian to keep belief that they can change the Malaysian political environment to be better than like what's happening now? Thank you.
I think there is a lot of hope and expectation in Muda. And that is to be expected because we are a youthful nation. And the DAP started as a very youthful party. When the DAP started in the 60s, we didn't have a youth wing because all the leaders were young. There's no youth wing. I became DAP Secretary General when I was 28 years old in Moa detention camp. So, the 15th general election is going to be a new phenomenon because 18 to 21, they will be able to vote.
Oh, no.
And I think we must not underestimate the young people in Malaysia. They are a great energetic force. But I don't agree with the view that the OSAs are useless. That the OSAs, they must retire and they must give way. I think there must be a combination, a synthesis of the young, the middle-aged, and the old to move Malaysia forward.
I think that's...
But the accent, the focus must be on the young. And that is to be expected. And we hope in 15th general election, there will be people in the age group from 18 to 21 who will stand as parliamentary and state assembly candidates. And the DAP will do it. And we'll see Mula doing it. Because if they can vote, why can't they also exercise a responsibility? But we are now in the information age. During my time, no Facebook, no Twitter, no internet. In those times, even the youth is a factor to be reckoned with. What about now? So we must not underestimate the information age, its impact on the youth. So I think we must explore strategies and ways and means whereby the youth in the country can play a more important role. The youth must be in the forefront. The middle age and the old people can advise, but the youth must be forward, must be the frontliners, and this must be the future for Malaysia. It must be the youths who make, with the assistance of the middle age and the young and the old. And I'm glad to see Taufik Ismail here, Member of Parliament. All people can contribute, and they must contribute because they have wisdom, they have passed the ages, they can pass down a wealth of experience to the young people.
Thank you, thank you. So I think that's a good point for us to stop. So before we move on to the book signing, let me just make a few final thank yous, of course, to all of you for attending. I'm very sorry, sir, the time, I'm really sorry, sir. Thank you all for coming today. I know it's a working day and it's 11 o'clock, but it's really much appreciated. Of course, thank you to Saudara Syed Saddiq for attending as well. I mean, these two gentlemen, of course, it goes without saying they would be here. Of course, to Sogo for sponsoring the venue, this beautiful venue, Miss Lisa and team, and of course, Andrew Lim. YB Hannah was actually part of the team that helped organize this. Unfortunately, she's not well. She can't be here. And of course, the DAP technical team, Mr. Yu and team, thank you very much for helping out. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are refreshments at the back in the foyer. And for those of you who would like to get your books autographed by the author and Saudara Lim Kit Siang, please do come up from this side, and then you can go down from that side once you've gotten your autographs. Please, and we are just going to arrange the seating here very quickly. Maybe queue up. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Queue up in an orderly manner, please. Thank you.
Go. The name, please. I'm here.